This is the most sophisticated villain on Better Call Saul, and the one who can endure the most humiliation, and who many people love even more than the show's main character. He is the very same Gus who will one day have the world's top contraband maker, Walter, and the largest underground processing facility. However, the road to success is never smooth. In Better Call Saul, Gus is still a subordinate of Don, the leader of a Mexican criminal organization, to build his own business empire. Gus used various tactics to undermine Hector's sales channels. His exceptional performance earned him the favor of Don. Feeling neglected by the boss, Hector, backed by the Salamanca family's power, starts to threaten and oppress Gus. Hector seems to have succeeded, but little does he know that his intelligence is no match for Gus. During a designated distribution of goods, Hector insisted that his men take an extra parcel to show his superiority. In the previous season's finale, Nacho, in order to protect his father's business, secretly swapped Hector's heart medication. During a meeting with Gus, Hector has a heart attack due to emotional agitation, and the swapped medication fails to work, causing him to collapse. Nacho thinks his plan is flawless, but he still can't escape Gus's sharp eyes. Nacho's destruction of evidence was monitored by Gus's men. However, Gus can't let Hector die just yet, so he brings in Barry to examine Hector. The prognosis is grim, and Barry suggests giving up on treatment, thinking a scoundrel like Hector deserves to die. But Gus is not pleased with this.
I decide what he deserves. No one else.
He remembers the scene of Max being killed by Hector, and vows to kill Hector himself to avenge Max. He arranges for Maureen, the best doctor in the country, to treat Hector. The cousins, acting as family members, come to take care of their uncle. Maureen suggests they talk to the patient more to stimulate his brain, but getting the cousins to talk more is like pulling teeth, so this task falls to Arturo and Nacho. When Gus receives Hector's hospital report, a plan forms in his mind, and he instructs Tyrus and Victor to carry it out. That night, Hector's men Nacho and Arturo arrive to pick up the goods. Relying on the power of the Salamanca family, Arturo demanded 6 packs of contraband again. Nacho remains loyal to Hector's side. At first, both sides are at a standoff. Then Tyrus signals Victor, and they pretend to yield, letting them think they've won. Nacho and Arturo assume Gus's men are cowards and lower their guard. Little do they know, Gus and his men, who had been lying in wait, rush in from behind. They don't kill Nacho, but they suffocate Arturo to death.
I know what you've done. The Salamancas, they do not. Do you understand what I'm saying? Look at me. From now on, you are mine.
From this point on, Nacho becomes Gus's mole in the Salamanca family. Nacho feels a bit desperate, as he had just promised his father that he would find a way out of the Salamanca family. Now, it seems very difficult to achieve this. On the other side, upon learning of his brother's death, Jimmy rushes to the scene, but unfortunately, he doesn't get to see his brother one last time. The last time Jimmy saw Chuck, he was still normally using various electrical appliances. In Chuck's backyard, Jimmy finds many appliances that had been moved outside, leading him to conclude that Chuck had relapsed for some reason. Back home, Jimmy is still immersed in his grief, unable to extricate himself. Kim understands Jimmy's feelings and brings out the sapphire gin they didn't finish last time. Pouring some for Jimmy, they sit silently on the couch, drinking until dawn. Howard organizes the memorial service, and almost all the prominent figures in the legal community attend, including Chuck's ex-wife, Rebecca, who also comes to pay her respects. When Jimmy and Kim return home, they find Howard waiting at their doorstep. It turned out that Howard thought that he had forced Chuck to resign, which led to Chuck's suicide, and he felt that he could not hide the truth from Jimmy. This action greatly endears Howard to the audience. Howard confesses everything to Jimmy, explaining that due to Chuck, the firm's overall insurance premiums had increased, and for the sake of the firm, he had considered forcing Chuck to retire. Unexpectedly, Jimmy pretends to know nothing about the insurance issue, even though he instigated it and does not confess. This starkly contrasts with Howard's honesty.
It never occurred to me that I could hurt him. He always seemed so strong. But he wasn't. I think he did what he did because of me.
Well, Howard, I guess that's your cross to bear.
They never expected Jimmy to say such a thing, leaving both Kim and Howard bewildered. In truth, Jimmy feels guilty about Chuck's death, but upon hearing Howard's confession, he shifts all the blame onto Howard. From this point on, Jimmy begins to learn how to avoid responsibility, a theme that will run throughout the subsequent storyline.
So I'm gonna make some coffee. Anybody want some?
To turn Nacho into his spy within the Salamanca family, Gus arranges for his men to stage a murder scene. They drive Arturo's car over a spike strip, then drag the preserved body of Arturo from the trunk to the driver's seat. Next, Victor and Tyrus fired a barrage of bullets to create the illusion that they had been ambushed by a rival group. Then they had Nacho sit in the car. They deliberately shot him in non-lethal areas, giving Nacho a chance to escape. To make the act more convincing, Victor shoots Nacho in the abdomen, then tosses him a phone to call the Salamanca family for help. Soon, the cousins arrive at the scene. They find Arturo dead and follow the blood trail to a barely conscious Nacho. The cousins rescue Nacho and load him into their car. They try to question him about the attackers, but Nacho claims he didn't see them clearly, so they focus on saving Nacho, who has served their family well. To avoid unnecessary trouble, they destroy Arturo's body in the car before leaving. Unable to go to a regular hospital, they turn to the versatile Caldera for help. Fortunately, both of the cousins are also O-negative, so Nacho doesn't die from blood loss. Caldera was tired of dealing with these issues, and he warned Nacho not to come to him again. Meanwhile, Gus receives a call from his superior, Juan, who informs him about the attack on Hector's man. Gus pretends he doesn't know anything about it and guesses their route is being watched. Juan instructs Gus to send out decoy trucks to avoid hijacking and asks how long the current supply will last. Gus estimates they can manage for another day or two. Upon hearing this, Juan tells Gus to find a local supplier, and Gus reminds Juan that their boss, Don, won't agree. Juan assures him that he will convince the boss. This has been Gus's true aim all along. Gus then went to a university, where he had already groomed his own contraband maker, Gale, who once partnered with Walter in Breaking Bad, is deeply passionate about chemistry and relatively naive. Gus was there to check the purity of the contraband that Gale had been researching. Gale's tests reveal that the purity falls short of their standards. Gale said that he could produce high-purity contraband right now without anyone detecting it. It's clear he is eager to repay Gus for his support. This scene connects to Breaking Bad, where Gale's murder site contained Gus's fingerprints, which Gus explained as being from a former student he had sponsored. However, the ever-cautious Gus declines Gale's offer, instructing him to continue focusing on his chemistry studies and await further instructions. Gus realizes that it's time to proceed with the construction of his underground lab. On the other side, the newly recovered Nacho headed to the criminal gang's territory with the cousins. He intends to frame someone else for the Salamanca attack. Nacho casually points to a car, claiming it was the one that forced them off the road. Nacho suggests that they're outnumbered and that we should wait until we bring in help. However, the cousins exchange a look and silently head off with their backpacks to exact revenge. At this point, Nacho starts to panic. He sees reinforcements arriving for the other side and, to avoid arousing Salamanca's suspicion, he musters his strength to get out of the car and join the fight. Though Nacho only kills one person, it's enough to prove his allegiance. After massacring the unfortunate gang, the cousins head back to Mexico to lay low. Nacho secretly meets with Gus that night. Nacho thinks Gus is sparing him to use the Salamanca family to eliminate rivals and seize territory, but Nacho underestimates Gus, whose grand ambitions are known only to himself.
Get some rest. You have more to do.
Nacho was desperate. It looked like he'd never get out of the hole he'd fallen into. This is the world's largest processing facility for blue contraband. Under Walter's management, its products are not only distributed worldwide but also maintain a purity level of 99.7%. The factory's owner, Gus, has made a fortune from it. However, many people don't know how this mysterious underground factory was built. Today, we reveal the construction process. The factory site was recommended by Lydia, an executive at Madrigal, with Juan's approval for Gus to seek local suppliers, and Gus's chemistry prodigy Gale eager to showcase his skills. Gus appointed Mike as the project manager to begin construction on the laundry's underground factory. To maintain confidentiality, the engineers brought in from Europe were blindfolded for the entire journey to the laundry facility. While working, they were not allowed to leave the premises. After a quick survey, the first engineer told Mike the job was doable and could be completed in 6 months without any blasting, as long as the boss had the money. Mike then received a call from Gus. Gus, having secretly observed this engineer, deemed him unreliable and instructed Mike to send him back the way he came. This showed Gus's level of concern for the project. He would tolerate no mistakes. Soon, Mike brought in a second engineer, Werner. In the same manner, Werner proved to be more reliable. He conducted a thorough site survey and brought instruments to test the site. He drafted an execution plan in his notebook, stating that the existing structure needed support before excavation to prevent collapse. Werner admitted it was challenging and even calculated the approximate amount of earth to be moved. Due to the depth, Werner suggested blasting might be needed if they encountered rock. It was clear that this guy was highly professional, exactly the kind of talent Gus needed. Hiding in the shadows, Gus only revealed himself after confirming the reliability of Werner's plan. They introduced themselves, with the engineer named Werner from Germany. To expedite the project, Gus had already arranged housing for the workers, knowing the project could take 6 to 10 months without breaks. For safety, Mike suggested adding entertainment facilities to prevent workers from getting bored and trying to escape, along with 24/7 surveillance. Security is Mike's specialty, so Gus felt confident leaving it in his hands. Soon, Werner and the workers arrived at the living quarters. Seeing the excellent living conditions, they felt very satisfied. However, when Mike was about to lay down the rules, one man was unwilling to comply. Mike didn't argue with Kai on the surface, but Kai was now under Mike's watchful eye. Every day, they rode in airtight vans to work, unable to see the outside environment or know their exact location. Time flew by, and the basement's framework was taking shape. But construction projects rarely go smoothly. During their work, a worker accidentally hit a support column. Kai was instantly unhappy, knowing this would delay their return home. Months of working without seeing the sun had made them restless, leading to a conflict between the two. Though Mike quickly stopped the fight, the workers' longing to return home grew stronger. Mike then had a private chat with Werner. He saw that Kai was a destabilizing factor and wanted him gone, but Werner said Kai was the best blaster they had. Werner admitted that although Mike had provided excellent facilities, the nearly year-long project was really wearing on the workers. Mike realized he needed to give them a break, so he brought them to the bar. While the young men were having a blast, Werner and Mike chatted on the side. Werner talked about his loving relationship with his wife, mentioning this was the longest he had been away from her and how much he missed her. This scene also serves as a foreshadowing for future events in the storyline. Just then, Mike was called away by his men. It turned out Kai had caused trouble again. Mike used his money to settle the issue and had Kai taken away. Meanwhile, Werner, out of boredom, started discussing their project with a stranger, a very dangerous sign. Mike saw this and promptly pulled him away. The next day, Mike warned Werner about his behavior, telling him the consequences would be severe if he repeated it. Werner acknowledged his mistake and promised not to do it again. When Gus came to inspect the work, Mike reported that although progress was slow, the quality was assured. Gus understood the workers' desire to go home, and Mike assured him he would keep them in check. The project quickly progressed to the point where only one last rock needed to be blasted. They placed the explosives and drilled holes. However, as they prepared to detonate, a problem arose with the wiring. Werner, the engineer, decided to check it himself. Alone in the basement, Werner felt a sudden fear. With months left until completion, he couldn't wait to go home to see his wife. After fixing the wiring issue, Werner composed himself and emerged from the basement. A test confirmed the wiring was fixed, and the trucks outside were ready. They planned to use the sound of trucks hitting speed bumps to mask the blast.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, now!
Having completed this crucial step, Werner saw an opportunity to request a few days off to visit his wife. He promised to ensure the work wouldn't be affected, but Mike refused. Knowing Gus's strict limits, Mike suggested that if Werner wanted to go home, he should finish the project as soon as possible, and then he would be paid well to go home. To ease Werner's longing, Mike allowed him extra time to call his wife. Realizing his request was now an unattainable luxury, Werner didn't press further. The next day, Mike went to the monitoring room. Werner had been on the phone with his wife for over an hour. With all conversations being monitored, Mike didn't restrict his time, letting him talk as long as he wanted, as long as he worked peacefully. When Werner finished his call, he began to watch the cameras in the living quarters, and the idea of escape was already in his mind. The next day Mike came back to the surveillance room and noticed that a few of the cameras had broken pixels. Sensing something was wrong, Mike hurried to check the living quarters. Upon reaching Werner's room, he found it empty, with only 2 project guides left on the table. Mike was furious and immediately ordered a search, but it was too late. Werner was nowhere to be found, with only a laser level left on the ground.